Hello, Harold. How are you?
Hello, Mike. Good, thank you.
It is great to have you in today. And emotional intelligence, they say, may be just as important, if not more so, than an IQ. So what is emotional intelligence?
Emotional intelligence is a term that popped up back in 1995 for the first time. The author Daniel Goleman wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, and back then I remember, a lot of people going, "What the heck is that?" Because we certainly hadn't talked about it in any depth in a leadership context at all.
And 95, not that long ago, really, is it?
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
But prior to, it's not that long ago. And yet prior to Goleman's book, and which was really the catalyst for some important conversations, people were being promoted at work largely on the basis of what they knew. So it sort of loaded on their smarts, if you will, their book smarts, as well as their technical acumen and those types of things. How you conducted yourself and how you behaved and how you led people was secondary to your being able to deliver. And it was really after 1995 where companies started to really get their head around this construct called emotional intelligence. It's the ability to understand the impact that your behavior is having on another person or a group in the moment, and the ability to adjust accordingly so that you get the strongest sense of connection with another person. And that then has become even more important in some cases than the what. People still get appraised and evaluated on what they deliver and those types of things. But now some performance management processes in companies will negate, even if you deliver, what you said you were going to deliver, if you aren't doing it in a way that is going to keep people engaged and connected and there, then that's a problem.
I know, I totally get that. So it's not so much about the skill that you have, it's about how you deliver that skill.
But part of it is skill in the sense of some people are just in terms of showing empathy and sensitivity and those types of things, they need to upgrade this thing around self-awareness.
And probably more important in today's, industries and world, isn't it?
Very important, particularly around making people feel included. So this whole notion of diversity and inclusion, a big part of that loads on emotional intelligence. And what are you doing to make it okay for people to come to work and actually give as much of themselves as they possibly can? And EQ at senior levels, Mike, EQ is more important, arguably EQ for the CEO and the executive team, more important than IQ.
Okay, give me an example of what low EQ is and high EQ.
I was working several years ago with a manager who is 6'4" tall
Wow.
and weighed about 115 kgs.
Good grief. Okay.
So a big guy.
A big guy.
And
Imposing.
when he gets angry, he swells, and he loses perspective. So there he is with his team or with a direct report who may be much smaller in height and stature. You've got to be aware of, particularly if you are a manager, the impact of those things, the nonverbals, to make it easier. If you're tall and big, you might want to back off a little bit. You might want to sit down. You want to do something that, makes it easier for the person on the other side of you who's experiencing you to actually stay connected with you. That's an example of a person who might have low EQ and versus a person who has high EQ who goes, what do I need to do? A big person needing to make themselves perhaps a little bit smaller to accommodate for that. Or a smaller person needing to make themselves a little bit bigger to project more power and confidence, which connects with an audience a bit more.
Right.
So that you get that sense of self-regulation going on for a person with emotional intelligence. They're able to sort of see that given how I feel right now, the audience or this other person is experiencing me in a way that feels disconnected. I got to do something about how I'm coming across right now.
Is there a difference between men's and women's EQ?
Yeah, there is. There is. Women in general have higher emotional intelligence.
Okay.
And it loads.
Oh, yes, I'd probably agree with that.
Some people think in terms of, perhaps girls who grow into women being more relationship oriented. But there's a strong correlation between how we raise our daughters and how we raise our sons. And we allow our daughters, young girls, to come sit on our lap and have a conversation about how they're feeling. And so by the time these girls become teenagers and then adults, as women, they're able to sort of follow the value chain between when I think this way, I feel this way, and when I feel this way, it has that impact on the outcome. So that's called the self-awareness chain there. With our boys, very often, when they drop on our knee to talk about their feelings, we brush them off, we send them away, we discourage them from talking about even having feelings. And it's a concern, basically, because a lot of boys then grow up as teenagers and then into men who actually aren't all that comfortable with feelings. And there's a bit of a gap there. It's a concern only because, the teenage suicide rate in New Zealand is exceptionally high, rated somewhere between 1 and 3rd in, developed nations.
It's high, and also just men's mental health in general as well. When you relate that back to feelings and talking about it, it could probably help in a lot of situations, but for some unknown reason we get closed off, don't we?
We absolutely do. I encourage, if we want to produce more men who are emotionally intelligent and certainly self-aware, I would encourage parents to start talking to their teenage sons at the most catastrophic zone in life. I mean, adolescence, if you think about it. Your teenage son should be able to talk about the complexity of feelings and not be terrified by them, but understand them a bit more. Girls tend to be ahead in that category.
And that helps men develop empathy as well, doesn't it?
It does.
If you're in touch with your feelings, which then, the flow-on effect from that is huge, I think.
Empathy is a huge part of emotional intelligence and the ability to sit with someone else and to actually feel another person's pain, to understand it. That type of a thing it's just very helpful around this thing that I often use the word connection, but that's really what's going on typically in a relationship, especially one where there is strong trust between two people.
Can you raise your IQ?
Well,
I thought you could. Please tell me you can.
Well, no. You can raise your IQ around sort of things that are current news, or you can refresh knowledge, technical acumen, and those kinds of things.
Okay.
But IQ loads on something a bit more broader than that, and it is just how adaptable is this person.
So is EQ easier to raise?
EQ is easier to raise. We've learned a lot about the brain in the last 20 years through neurolinguistic research. And a lot more than we knew when I went through graduate school in the 80s or so. And the limbic brain is very important. It sits under the rational brain. We tend to overemphasize, or at least we used to in the workplace, overemphasize the rational brain and totally underestimate the emotive brain. And now we're understanding that that's where trust resides, that's where empathy resides. And so just getting people to the point, you can lift it. It's again around self-awareness, but you actually can lift EQ to a point where a person understands better how to keep people connected with them longer.
And the benefit of all of this?
Well, the benefit is, certainly in a business context, you want the best people working for you. And in a competitive job market, people aren't going to work for managers who don't seem to convey appreciation or support or understanding or those types of things. We've gone way past that realm in business where you can just line people up and give them their marching orders and send them out. There's this thing now called engagement, employee engagement. It's real. Mm-hmm. Every organization that I work with focuses on how do we attract, how do we retain and develop employees, and you've got to develop. A lot of funds have gone into investments in leadership development in companies for this very reason. They're not teaching people in these leadership programs. They're not teaching people how to manage more effectively. They're teaching them how to lead, and that's where that emotive connection is there. getting people inspired.
Okay, so would it be easy to say just be nicer, or is that too wishy-washy?
It's part of it. I would say probably there's a positivity associated with it. Authenticity is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. And authenticity is a core element of emotional intelligence. And there is just something around a positivity, a person who is constructive, a person who is affirming. I make the case, Mike, that it is a human need to be needed.
Yes.
And yet we don't let people know. We don't affirm people. We don't recognize them. We don't validate them. We don't thank them. You don't need a big budget to drive up employee engagement. All you need is a manager. All you need is a manager who is really, has strong emotional intelligence and takes the time to understand what's going to motivate each person that works for me and putting in some effort around making sure that that person is fired up, inspired. Those are the things that drive results. And it's as simple sometimes as saying, thank you.
I think we'll leave it there, Harold, and thank you. It is 10 to 2. It's Magic Talk with Mike.